councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war?
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
One of the hardest parts of my job is to connect Iraq to the war on terror.
I'll make our government open and transparent so that anyone can ensure that our business is the people's business. Justice Louis Brandeis once said, "Sunlight is the greatest disinfectant." And as president, I'm going to make it impossible for congressmen or lobbyists to slip pork barrel projects or corporate welfare into laws when no one's looking, because when I'm president, meetings where laws are written will be more open to the public, no more secrecy. That's a commitment I make to you as president. No more secrecy. And when there's a bill that ends up on my desk as president, you, the public, will have 5 days to look online and find out what's in it before I sign it, so that you know what your government's doing. When there are meetings between lobbyists and a government agency, we'll put as many of those meetings as possible online for every American to watch. When there's a tax bill being debated in Congress, you will know the names of the corporations that would benefit and how much money they would get. And we will put every corporate tax break and every pork barrel project online for every American to see. You will know who asked for them, and you can decide whether your representative is actually representing you.
Over the past 60-some-odd years, the U.S. has gone from a thriving, cutting-edge nation on a meteoric rise to a sad shell of itself, a global joke, a living hypocrisy, and even hated. During World War II, American soldiers fought and died for the protection and freedom of people of other nations too weak to defend themselves. Soldiers witness a side of humanity that most of us in the West will never know. Most of us have never, and most likely will never, know the smell of the air after a bloody battle. How gunpowder, dirt, blood, feces, and sweat all mingle together in an indescribable way that sears the nostrils and coats the tongue. War is horror, sometimes necessary if the cause is just. Since World War II, we have had the Korean War, Vietnam War, Desert Storm, and now Iraq and Afghanistan, not to mention the numerous police actions, skirmishes, and conflicts that aren't officially labeled war. An unbiased look at the machinations of these wars, and one could argue that no war since World War II could be considered just and/or necessary. Since wars must be approved by Congress, which itself is comprised of individuals chosen by the people, how is it we have allowed over 500,000 U.S. soldiers to die in wars we didn't agree with? Why has our government grown increasingly bold in their blatant disregard for what the American people want, following their own agenda? To answer this, we must revisit the most heinous act in modern U.S. history, the assassination of our 35th President, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. There are a plethora of books and documentaries exploring all the varied theories concerning the masterminds behind the assassination of JFK, so I won't belabor them here. However, there are indisputable facts that I would like to point out. Eyewitness testimony reported suspicious men, shots, and smoke from the grassy knoll which lies opposite the school book depository from which Oswald supposedly fired. The fatal shot delivered to Kennedy threw his body to the rear and left. Physics tells us that this could only happen from a blow originating from the front and right, the direction of the grassy knoll. The so-called magic bullet, which supposedly traversed 15 layers of clothing, 7 layers of skin, and approximately 15 inches of tissue, struck a necktie knot, removed 4 inches of rib and shattered a radius bone, lodged itself in Governor Colony's thigh and was found at Parkland Memorial Hospital on his gurney in remarkable condition. Any forensics expert, indeed anybody who has seen an episode of CSI, can tell you that a bullet causing as much damage as the magic bullet supposedly did would have been smashed, gouged, and maybe even shattered into multiple fragments. These and facts like these were ignored by the Warren Commission, which was assembled specifically to investigate the assassination. It took them 10 months to publish an 888-page report that didn't investigate the assassination so much as it did defend, to sometimes outlandish lengths, the stance held by the authorities from day one. That Lee Harvey Oswald, a communist sympathizer and America hater acting alone, fired 3 shots from a 6th-floor window from a distance of over 200 feet, fatally wounding JFK. End of story. There is so much more to this, but the point I am trying to make is that the official report does not corroborate both physics as well as eyewitness testimony, which can only mean that the accomplished men of the Commission either collectively dropped the ball or purposely ignored evidence that did not suit the expected findings. They lied to us. We know it and they know it. And despite much public outcry following the publication of the report, amid demands of a reinvestigation, nothing was done. They, with a capital T, simply ignored the American citizens, or worse, mocked and belittled anybody questioning the findings. Indeed, the smear campaign against any dissenters has been so effective that the knee-jerk reaction to anyone questioning the government's behavior is to label them mentally unstable and paranoid. It is no secret that the world powers want to create a one-world government. However, Americans, enjoying the freedoms afforded them by the Constitution and Bill of Rights, see this move as a threat to their national sovereignty, and rightly so. They understand that the U.S. is unique in the world concerning the liberties we have and view any inclusion of foreign laws to ours as a step backwards. So the question is, how will the powers that be convince the American people to back this agenda? The answer is that they don't have to. It must be understood that they have infinite patience and their plans are long-term, to put it mildly, and they have been manipulating us for a very long time. There are literally thousands of examples of this going all the way back to the founding of this country, but I will limit this to a handful of examples from recent history. What follows is a tiny taste of ongoing frauds and treasonous acts perpetrated by the government against the American people. Everything I include is supported by evidence and is, for all intents and purposes, fact. From the beginning, there was purpose behind forced schooling, purpose that had nothing to do with what parents, kids, or communities wanted. School was looked upon from the first decade of the 20th century as a branch of industry and a tool of governance. The attitude can be heard in a statement made by President Woodrow Wilson in a speech to businessmen before World War I. Quote, "We want one class to have a liberal education. We want another class, a very much larger class of necessity, to forego